of making this vision a reality. Is this a dream? Maybe, but this is the beautiful dream that we must work together towards. Let us work towards this noble goal. Let us continue humanity's journey of hope, a journey started by our forefathers, a journey that we must complete. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom. Om Santi, Santi, Santi Om. Namo Buddhaya. Thank you very much. May God bless us all. May peace be upon us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Indonesia. Thank the President of the Republic of Indonesia. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Recep Tayyip Erdogan, President of the Republic of Turkey. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly. Thank the President of the Republic of Indonesia. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Recep Tayyip Erdogan, President of the Republic of Turkey. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly. Thank the President of the Republic of Indonesia. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Recep Tayyip Erdogan, President of the Republic of Turkey. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly. Thank the President of the Republic of Indonesia. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency
Sayın Başkan,
Recep Tayyip
Excellency President of
Erdogan,
UNGA,
President of the Republic of Turkey.
Excellencies, heads of
I
state and
request
government,
protocol to escort His Excellency and
distinguished
invite him to
Secretary
address
General,
the Assembly. Thank the
distinguished
President
delegation
of the
members,
Republic of the Assembly will
on behalf
hear an
of
address
myself
by
and
His
my nation,
Excellency
Sayın
I greet you
Başkan,
all with most heartfelt Excellency President of UNGA.
President of the
I wish for the 80th United Nations General Assembly to bring blessings to all humanity. I am deeply honored to address you once again from this podium, which represents the collective conscience of humanity. I congratulate Mr. Young, who has completed his term as President of the General Assembly, and I wish success to Ms. Baerbock, who has taken over this position. At the outset of my speech, I would like to first express my regret at the absence today of the President of the State of Palestine, Mahmoud Abbas, at a time when Palestine is being recognized by an increasing number of countries. Today, we stand here on this podium. I stand here on this podium alongside my 86 million citizens, also for our Palestinian brothers and sisters whose voices are being silenced. I'd like to thank all the countries who announced that they recognize the state of Palestine, and I call on all the other countries who have not done so yet to do so, to recognize the state of Palestine as soon as possible. Esteemed President, distinguished members, the United Nations Charter was signed in San Francisco 8 years ago, and it entered into force on October the 24th, 1945. I would like to recall here again the first words of the first article of the UN Charter. Quote, "The purpose of the United Nations is to maintain international peace and security," unquote. As we celebrate the 80th anniversary of the UN in this hall, grave events are unfolding in many parts of the world that cast a shadow over the very first words of the UN Charter's opening article. particularly in Gaza, right before our very eyes, genocide has been going on for over 700 days now. Even as we gather here, as we speak now, Israel is currently massacring civilians in Gaza. The number of civilian casualties in Gaza has surpassed 65,000. Unfortunately, the number of people who are still trapped under the rubble is not yet known, and more than 20,000 of those who died were children. For the last 23 months, a child has been murdered by Israel in Gaza every hour. Yes, every hour. These are not just figures, dear friends. All of these, each one of these is a person, a human being, innocent people. People are now being killed not with weapons, but with the weapon of starvation. In the 21st century, under the gaze of the civilized world, 428 people died of starvation. Out of those 428, 146 were children, and this number is increasing every day. Now, I will show you a photo, which is a picture from daily life in Gaza. The first photo, as you see, these are people. These are women with these cups that they are holding in their hands, cups and buckets. Just feel your conscience and answer the following question. Can we possibly have a reasonable reason for this brutality in 2025? But this shameful picture in Gaza has been unfolding and is being repeated every day for 23 months now. And there are 2.5 million Gazans who live in 365 square kilometers. And every day what happens is they are being dragged from one place to another. The healthcare infrastructure of Gaza is completely collapsed. Doctors have been killed or they have disappeared while under custody. Ambulances have been hit. Hospitals targeted and destroyed. Treatment is not possible. Surgery is not possible. It's not possible to find medications. Now, dear friends, now as Tayyip Erdogan, with a heavy heart, with my heart bleeding here, I am telling you, innocent little ones, just 2 or 3 years old, without hands, arms, or legs, have become, unfortunately, a common sight to see in Gaza. This one. What kind of a human conscience can possibly bear this? Possibly. How can one stay silent vis-a-vis this? In a world where children are dying of starvation and lack of medication, can we possibly have calm and peace? We all are parents. We have children or grandchildren who we dearly cherish. Here, say in America or in Europe, anywhere in the world, when a small rose thorn hurts a child's hand, the hearts of parents break. But in Gaza, children's hands, arms, and legs are being amputated without anesthesia. Now, I'm extremely sorry to say, but this represents the lowest point of humanity. Human history has not witnessed such bloodshed within the last century. All of this is happening before our very eyes. The genocide in Gaza is being broadcast live every moment through the media and social media. So far, Israel has deliberately killed 250 journalists working in national and international media in Gaza. And they have closed all the entrance into Gaza, but they still have not been able to cover up the genocide. I wholeheartedly support Secretary General Guterres because he consistently draws attention to the ongoing genocide in Palestinian territories, and I would like to once again congratulate him for his courage. But the United Nations has not even been able to protect its own personnel in Gaza, unfortunately. In Gaza, 500 people rushing to help others have been killed. Out of those 500, 326 were UN staff members. Esteemed President, distinguished members, now, genocide, like the Holocaust, is a shameful concept which refers to the mass extermination of people. It's a barbaric concept. But today, it's not only people who are being killed in Gaza, mind you. Animals are being targeted and killed in Gaza. In Gaza, agricultural land, gardens, trees, grass, century-old olive trees are being destroyed. In Gaza, water supplies are being destroyed and polluted. Buildings, homes, libraries, hospitals, schools, mosques, churches, and historical structures in Gaza are being deliberately destroyed. The soil of Gaza is being rendered useless for humans, for animals, and for plants. So now let me show you yet another photo. And let me ask you here, look at this photo. What could this photo here possibly have to do with security concerns? This is being against life, don't you think? Let me state this openly from this podium. There is no war in Gaza. We cannot possibly talk about the presence of two sides in Gaza. Because in Gaza, on one side, there is a regular army with the most modern, most lethal weapons, and on the other hand, there are innocent civilians, innocent children. This is not fight against terrorism. This is an occupation, deportation, exile, genocide, and life destruction, mass destruction policy carried out by invoking the events of October the 7th. Today, while Gaza is being destroyed under the pretext of Hamas, concurrently, simultaneously, the West Bank, where Hamas is not in power, is also being occupied step by step, and innocent civilians are being massacred through executions. Moreover, Israel is not limiting itself to Gaza and the West Bank only. By launching attacks on Syria, on Iran, Yemen, and Lebanon, Israel is also threatening regional peace. Just recently, an Israeli attack took place against a delegation meeting in Qatar for ceasefire negotiations. The attack on Qatar has also shown that the Israeli leadership is now completely out of control. Netanyahu is not obviously interested in forging peace or releasing the hostages. Not only Israel's neighbors, but all countries in the Middle East are subject to the Israeli government's reckless threats. And we must realize the following. Due to the increasing aggression of Israel, in Europe and the West in general, the values that emerged after the Second World War have been eroded. The most fundamental human rights, such as freedom of expression, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly and protest, women's rights, children's rights, democracy, equality, and justice, have been shelved away. At this point, we all have to see the following truth, my dear friends. The Israeli government, driven by an obsession with the promised lands, is openly threatening regional peace and the shared values of humanity. Three celestial religions. Jerusalem hosts all three celestial religions, and a common inherited holy place, Al-Quds, is holy for all three religions. This madness disturbs conscientious Jews. It fuels anti-Semitism around the world. We cannot continue with this madness anymore. We have to have ceasefire in Gaza as soon as possible. Attacks should stop. Humanitarian aid should be able to enter with no obstacles. The genocide team should be held accountable vis-à-vis international law. And God willing, this will definitely happen. Vis-à-vis the barbarity taking place in Gaza, everyone who is keeping silent is accomplice to this barbarity. From here, I would like to call on all the heads of state and government. Today is the day. Today is the day to stand firm alongside the oppressed Palestinians and alongside humanity. While your peoples back home are reacting to the barbarity in Gaza, do show the courage to take action here. Fulfill your humanitarian duty toward Gaza, where children are raising children. On this occasion, I would like to say the following. There are peoples all around the world who are taken to the streets. Unarmed activists and volunteers from different countries of the world, academicians, students, journalists, everyone, all the defenders of Palestine. I would like to say to them, thank you so much, and clear bows and favorable winds for their actions. Esteemed delegation members, for 13 years, I have spoken to you from this platform about the oppression and conflicts in our neighbor, Syria. Just as I raise my voice today for the oppressed people of Gaza, likely for 13 years, I have also drawn attention to the cries of the Syrians, and here I became their voice and breath as well. The persecution that caused the death of 1 million people and that forced millions more to flee their homeland has, thankfully, become a thing of the past with the December 8th revolution. Our Syrian brothers and sisters opened the doors to a new period as of December the 8th. I believe that the people of Syria who fought against a bloodthirsty regime will also be able to carry the victory they achieved at great cost to its rightful place, God willing. We'll support with all our means the vision of a one and unified Syria with no forms of terrorism, especially ISIS, being present. A free Syria where security is established is what we want. As stability takes root in Syria, the winners for sure will be all the neighboring countries, our entire region, along with Syrians. And the brotherly countries in the Gulf I would like to thank them for their contributions for Syria to recuperate. All the regional and international actors who share the same principles with us, God willing, we will continue with our cooperation with all those actors in the same manner. Esteemed friends, we hope that the nuclear issue with our neighbor Iran will be resolved through diplomacy as soon as possible. It should not be forgotten that our region cannot tolerate yet another crisis. Meanwhile, the stability, security, and prosperity of our neighbor Iraq are extremely important for the well-being of our region. In this regard, we attach great importance to strategic moves based on stability and prosperity, such as the Development Path Project. In the north, we are hosting with great enthusiasm the Istanbul process between Russia and Ukraine, both of which are our neighbors. Through direct talks, we facilitated the exchange of several prisoners and corpses, and we worked to identify the modalities of peace negotiations between the parties. Don't forget, there is no winner of war and no losers of a just peace. So with this motto in mind, in the coming days also, we will continue to work hard for a peaceful ceasefire. Meanwhile, we have encouraged the parties from the very beginning to establish peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia. We are pleased that steps were taken on August the 8th, steps that will enable the establishment of lasting peace between the two countries. I would like to once again congratulate the President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, the Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, and the American President Donald Trump, who contributed to this process, and I would like to congratulate them. On this occasion, I would also like to state that the normalization process between our country and Armenia is progressing as planned. Within the scope of the Ankara process, which is another of our mediation activities, we continue our efforts to resolve the conflict between Somalia and Ethiopia. I hope that the parties will successfully conclude this genuine initiative as soon as possible. Distinguished delegation members, we have been implementing the Montreux Convention, which guarantees security in the Black Sea. And we have been implementing this convention impartially and to the letter for exactly 89 years now. We want to see the Aegean Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean as a basin of stability and prosperity where the legitimate interests of all parties involved are respected. We are ready for constructive cooperation on all issues, particularly on energy and the environment, and we expect the same approach from our neighbors. On this occasion, I would like to particularly underline that projects which exclude Turkey and the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus in the Eastern Mediterranean, such projects which exclude us will not be successful. Turkey has rights and authority in the western part of the island of Cyprus, while the Turkish Cypriots have legitimate rights in the area surrounding the island. An Eastern Mediterranean Conference, which we have proposed before, would contribute to finding common ground. Resolving the Cyprus issue has been tried many times before, but due to the rigid stance of the Greek Cypriot side, no resolution has been found. We cannot possibly have this as a foundation for a resolution of the issue. There are two separate states and two separate peoples on the island of Cyprus. Turkish Cypriots are equal owners of the island and they will not accept being a minority. The international community must put an end to the unfair and inhumane isolation that the Turkish Cypriots have been subjected to for half a century now. I reiterate the call I made at the last 3 UN General Assemblies. Let me repeat. I call on the international community to recognize the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus and to establish diplomatic, political, and economic relations with it. Esteemed President, distinguished members, in the coming period, we desire a new beginning and vision in Turkey-European Union relations. This should not be a vision that just saves the day, but rather a vision that redefines the horizon and shapes our shared future. For this, it is of course important that the European Union is as willing and determined as we are. As a net security provider, we continue to contribute to the operations and missions of the United Nations, NATO, OSCE, and the European Union. The annual NATO summit next year will be held in Turkey, in Ankara. The USA, who is our NATO ally, our relations with them are continuing on trade, investments, energy, defense industry, in addition to other many areas, and we're strengthening our relations with them. Meanwhile, we attach great importance to the peace, stability, and prosperity of our brotherly countries in Central Asia, which is our ancestral homeland. Our Organization of Turkic States is moving forward with confidence on the path to becoming a global actor, going beyond being merely a regional umbrella. We are making intensive efforts to ensure the continuation of peace and stability in the Balkans, where we have strong historical, cultural, and people ties. The Balkan Peace Platform, which we established in July, is the newest and most concrete manifestation of our efforts in this direction. And this October, we'll once again assume the command of KFOR forces. In Afghanistan, our fundamental desire is that the current administration demonstrates an approach that embraces the society and that takes human values into consideration. In this process, it is essential that the international community does not leave Afghan people alone, and as Turkey and as the Turkish nation will stand by the Afghan people at all times. Esteemed friends, in South Asia, we consider the preservation of peace and stability to be of utmost importance. We are pleased with the ceasefire achieved following the tensions last April between Pakistan and India, the tension which had escalated into a conflict. It is important to see a cooperation between the two countries when it comes to counterterrorism. The issue of Kashmir should be resolved on the basis of resolutions of the UN for the best for our brothers and sisters in Kashmir through dialogue, we hope. In the continent of Africa, from education to health, from infrastructure to in other areas, our relations are improving annually. And while providing all possible support to Somalia, we are also continuing our humanitarian aid activities. In Sudan, the conflict that has been going on for over 2 years saddens us deeply. Stopping the bloodshed in Sudan and establishing sustainable peace is the shared responsibility of the international community. And Turkey's efforts in this direction will continue. The Great Lakes region has suffered greatly from years of ongoing instability and conflict. Our hope is that these conflicts in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo will give way to lasting peace and stability. We wholeheartedly support the efforts being carried out under the mediation of the US and the facilitation of Qatar. The increasing terrorist activities in West Africa, particularly in the Sahel Basin, are also of great concern to us. We will continue our unwavering efforts to ensure peace, tranquility, and stability for the peoples of this region with whom we share historical ties. Drawing inspiration from the historical double-headed Turkish Selçuk eagle, I would like to emphasize that our relations with Asian countries in Turkish foreign policy are of great strategic importance. We pursue a 360-degree approach in this policy. Within the framework of our Return to Asia initiative, we are deepening our engagement with regional organizations such as ASEAN, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, for example. We will continue to develop new partnerships with Asian countries, and we attach great importance to developing our relations with Latin America and the Caribbean region in a spirit of partnership and a win-win approach. We are determined to further strengthen the friendly ties we have established with all the countries in the region. Esteemed delegation members, increasing protectionist trends in international trade and disruptions in supply chains are leading to fundamental changes in the global economy. To successfully address current challenges, we support the reform of rules-based international trade, including the World Trade Organization. I believe access to affordable, safe, and sustainable energy is essential, particularly for developing countries, to be able to achieve their development goals. We are resolutely advancing the strategically important Trans-Caspian East-West Middle Corridor project, which extends from China to Europe. We contribute to the development of world trade with our modern transportation infrastructure and the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars line. On our journey to build a future that respects nature, we are moving forward with determination towards the 2053 net zero emission target. We are pleased to observe that the zero waste movement, under the patronage of my wife Emine Erdoğan, has grown in waves around the world every year, reaching more people and hearts. In this process, it is no longer a choice for developed countries to fulfill their responsibilities. It has now become an obligation for them. As one of the countries providing the most development aid in the world, we are striving to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. To achieve the 2030 goals, and to enable hundreds of millions of people around the world to live with dignity, we advocate for aligning the global financial architecture with the principle of leaving no one behind. And here, let me also particularly draw your attention to the following. While we grapple with geopolitical challenges, humanity is also witnessing an extraordinary leap forward in artificial intelligence, AI. The transformative power and the benefits offered by these technologies, no society should be deprived of these benefits. AI technologies should be used for the benefit of humanity, not as a new tool of domination. The UN Technology Bank for the Least Developed Countries, which we host in Turkey, plays a critical role in closing the digital and technological gap. We have prepared a children's Rights Convention in the digital world, and we will soon open this up for ratification. I'm sure this will create a lot of awareness in this area, and we expect your support for this. On the other hand, in today's world, where racism, xenophobia, and particularly Islamophobia have reached alarming levels, combating these trends that directly threaten the culture of coexistence has now become an essential duty for humanity. It is significant that Mr. Moratinos, High Representative of the Alliance of Civilizations, has also been appointed as the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy on combating Islamophobia. As I stated here last year, the institution of the family is under threat today as never before. Defending the family, consisting of a woman and a man, means defending humanity, defending nature, life, and the future. Turkey will continue to defend the family in the face of ever-increasing attacks. Distinguished delegation members, the roots of the UN, established to prevent humanity from experiencing the disaster of war again, are filled with values that will eliminate the dark era we are in. We fully support the UN 80 initiative launched by Secretary General Guterres to make our organization more effective and more efficient. I hope this initiative succeeds as a process that will further strengthen all the activities of the UN. I express our readiness to provide strong support to this process, also driven by our vision of making Istanbul a UN hub. I sincerely believe that it is our shared responsibility to take steps that will restore the founding spirit of the UN in its 80th year. We will continue to say, the world is bigger than five until a system is established where the righteous are powerful, not the powerful are righteous. Our duty is not to abandon the system, but rather to repair it and to make it work again. Without a doubt, a more just, a fairer world is possible. Turkey will patiently continue its fight for the construction of a more just world. So may God help and aid us all. Once again, let me greet you all with kind regards and thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Turkey. The Assembly will hear an address by Her Excellency Dina Eshilia, Boluarte Chegara, President of the Republic of Peru. I request protocol to escort Her Excellency and invite her to address the Assembly.
Señora
Madam President of the General Assembly, Annalena Baerbock, Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state, ladies and gentlemen present here in this august forum. Peru is the center and cradle of great millennial civilizations, the last of which was the Inca Empire, which left us a legacy of greatness. We are also heirs of the Viceroyalty of Peru, which encompassed 2/3 of South America. We are a mestizo nation, a fundamental mix between Hispanic and Andean peoples, proud to be the heirs of the two greatest empires of Europe and America of the 16th century. The Peruvian people today are resilient, entrepreneurial, supportive, and lovers of peace, freedom, and democracy. Our great writers, Mario Vargas Llosa and José María Arguedas, shared the idea that Peru is a country of all bloods. Our identity creatively expresses that we are the unity of the diverse, united under the same red and white Peruvian flag. In our country, native peoples and peoples of the world live together in peace and unity as a great synthesis of Peru, the country in which Pope Leo XIV lived and worked in for 40 years, a naturalized Peruvian because of his deep love for our people, both for his supportive as well as his peaceful disposition and his Catholic and Christian faith. All studies indicate that we are the most entrepreneurial country in the world, which is why, after the COVID-19 pandemic, that, due to poor government administration, claimed more than 2 million lives. But we have begun to recover, and today we look back on more than 17 months of consecutive economic growth. We have overcome the recession and inflation caused by political violence and by corruption, a failed coup d'etat, and the flight of more than $20 billion. That was between 2021 and 2023. We have regained the trust of national but also of foreign investment, and we have embraced freedom. We are a solvent and a stable country. Because of the coup attempt of December 2022, which sought to establish a dictatorship by forcing all branches of the state into submission, I had to constitutionally assume the presidency of the Republic. Since that date, a narrative was established by which the coup plotter became a victim, and the president, who constitutionally and legally assumed the presidency, was accused by some quarters of being a coup plotter and usurper. Lies turned into truth, and truth turned into lies. This is one of the issues of our time: the building of false narratives to attempt to defend anti-democratic political projects. The thinking goes that ideologies of hatred, where they're projects of failed states that grow into all-powerful states, require, in order to impose their will, a false narrative, in order to achieve their objectives through violence, and who, once in power, crush freedoms, silence the press and democratic opposition, violate human rights, and begin to control, to confiscate, and to expropriate private companies, creating a corrupt bureaucracy that destroys the economy, society, and public morality. The first step for achieving all of this is to build a narrative in order to lie. The ideology of class hatred is very skillful at distorting reality and building false narratives because it uses the totalitarian method of repeating a lie ad infinitum, as was done in the world before the Second World War, and as is happening again today, because totalitarianism renews itself, presents itself with other faces, but it remains a serious threat to countries and to the world. The cynical narrative is reinforced by interventionism in the internal affairs of countries, supporting and spreading falsehoods to destroy democracy and eliminate freedom. In Peru, we have overcome strong, organized and persistent political violence that sought the return of the coup plotters' government, and since 2024, progress has been made in restoring stability and confidence. And this is why the Peruvian economy managed to grow this year by 3.3%. And in the current year, 2025, is exceeding 3.5% growth, with forecasts that in 2026 the trend of economic growth will continue. The government guarantees 3 years of economic growth, being the leader in South America. Inflation is below 2% annually. International reserves amount to more than $88 billion, and our currency remains stable, and it's getting stronger every day. Our external debt is less than 32.2% of GDP, one of the lowest in the Americas and in the world. And our fiscal deficit this year will be 2.2% annually. Madam President of this magnificent General Assembly, on October 24th, the UN was created after World War II, when one of the greatest totalitarian political projects built on an ideology of hatred, leading to the most serious genocide in human history, the Holocaust, was defeated. And this is something that we must never, I say never, forget. That dreadful war caused the death of 60 million human beings. All ideologies of hate, class hatred, and its elevation as a principle and driver of history, racial hatred, nationalist hatred, religious hatred, ethnic hatred, hatred against women, amongst others, are the causes for the worst crimes committed in human history. Ideologies of hatred build narratives as absolute truths that instrumentalize people and nations. The political constitution of my homeland, Peru, affirms that the defense of the individual and their dignity is the supreme goal of society and of the state. Peru, therefore, rejects the two principal hate narratives in the world: namely class hatred and religious hatred. These are the origins of wars and inhumane violence. In Peru, we suffered for more than 20 years from a messianic, dogmatic, violent and genocidal terrorism that cost the lives of more than 70,000 Peruvians. The terrorist hates elections and the citizens' right to choose and to stand for election. When they participate, they do so to destroy democracy from within. However, the narrative that they wanted to impose is a flagrant lie. The armed forces and the police, who defended the life and the freedom of Peruvians, are now accused of violating human rights. Thus, the heroes who defended life, democracy, and freedom are turned into victimizers, and the terrorists are turned into victims. In this way, the heroes who defended democracy are being persecuted in trials that drag on for decades, while the terrorists are compensated and considered victims. This is the world in reverse. The UN was a fundamental milestone in the 20th century, but in the 21st century, we must be more vigilant. It is our duty to prevent the world from plunging into new genocides and new violence. It is not acceptable in a civilized world that one country invade another using a false narrative to justify a war that first and foremost attacks the civilian population. It is not acceptable to slaughter civilians, to capture hundreds of young people, women, and even children, and use them as hostages. We live under the threat of international organized crime. In Peru, international crime based on extortion uses terrorist methods such as bomb attacks to submit citizens to its will. These criminal organizations that use weapons of war have created financial mechanisms to launder blood-stained money, sending large sums back to their countries of origin. They seek to normalize this violence, which requires, in order to be defeated, recognition by the UN as terrorist organizations and new national and international legislation to stop them being a threat to the democratic system and to the development of peoples. It is also imperative that we act against drug trafficking and illegal mining that destroys the environment, pollutes rivers, and condemns peoples and individuals to slavery. International crime has subjected thousands of women taken from their home countries through violence and deception and being exploited and deprived of their freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living through times that recall the darkest chapters of our modern history, and Peru is convinced that the world does not need less UN, but more and a better UN, one that is in tune with the times. In times in which ideologies of hatred that cause and cause so much damage to humanity have taken refuge in lies, in misinformation, and which have penetrated democratic societies. Peru, as a founding member, is committed to an open multilateral system the pillar of the model that has brought peace and prosperity. But we have to look at what's happening around us in the world. At this time, as we're meeting here, in other parts of the world, they are killing children, girls, boys, innocent people. Prosperity will only come if we are united and work together. And we have to adapt to new threats. Each of our countries has the duty to make their contribution towards finding solutions to the problems that we all face together. And my country is striving to do this. But the interconnection of our societies and economies means that it is only through international cooperation that we can resolve the crises which we face. If we do not reform the United Nations, our common home, to restore representativeness and effectiveness to its action, then we run the very serious risk of seeing one of the most precious instruments that the international community has for world stability disappearing. For this reason, Peru supports the work of the UN 80 initiative, launched by the Secretary General, placing particular emphasis on the need to refocus the organization on its fundamental functions, bringing it closer to the needs of peoples, and at the same time making it more efficient. UN 80 must be an opportunity to strengthen multilateralism and ensure that the organization is better prepared to achieve its essential goals. This reform can only truly become fully effective if it is complemented by a transformation in UN governance that prevents institutional stalemates when it comes to decision-making, while ensuring its suitability. Ladies and gentlemen, in Peru, our government is working to meet its commitments, both to our citizens as well as to the international community, facing the threat of organized crime resulting from the collapse of tyrannical governments that led to migration to other countries. This is true of our country. From day one, my government has fought to restore governance in the country and to defeat polarization and violence. In Peru, there is full separation of powers, the rule of law, respect for freedom, and human rights. My government is the most stable of the last 5 years, during which 5 presidents have succeeded one another. We are fighting for citizen security, facing crime that takes advantage of the rise in the price of gold, and drug trafficking. We have achieved positive, verifiable results in these areas. We are working to strengthen human capital. We are fighting child malnutrition and anemia. And we are building schools and hospitals throughout the country, which has not been done in recent years. The priority is children, women, and the Peruvian family. We are modernizing the country's infrastructure, ports, airports, roads, bridges. designing an economy that is better connected to the world, as well as a firm policy for fighting corruption. Our goal is to guarantee free and impartial elections, defeating the attempt of a violent minority that seeks their failure. Ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations Organization has always been present in the modern history of my country, particularly in its most difficult moments. Similarly to what is happening elsewhere in the world, and despite our efforts, Peru today finds its democratic institutions and the rule of law under attack by the polarization of politics, the cause and consequence of the return of extremist violence. We suffer from the scourge of transnational organized terrorist crime, which causes deaths, attacks, insecurity, and drug trafficking that destroys the social fabric. We face the threat of climate change that is destroying our Amazon, causing the melting of our glaciers, and putting our biodiversity at risk. We promote inclusive and sustainable growth in a context of opposing powers. But none of these problems is merely national, but global. This is why we need the United Nations to once again be a forum for dialogue and cooperation. I wish to recall the legacy of Ambassador Javier Milei, who managed to do relevant work in the organization despite the Cold War. With that example in mind, and in view of our region's adherence to the purposes of the Charter, and in order to ensure better representation, we believe it is time for the next Secretary General to come from Latin America. Ladies and gentlemen, Peru is committed to ensuring that this General Assembly this year is not a mere commemoration, but the reaffirmation of our commitment to collective action that will revitalize the United Nations as a tool that supports peace and global unity, as well as development. We must stand firm in the truth, in the face of narratives that try to conceal it, pervert it, or openly lie in order to hide agendas that do not correspond to our time, much less to the destiny of humanity. For this reason, it is essential that we strengthen truth against narratives that are based on hatred, the lie repeated that seeks to impose itself and only leads to destruction. But despite all of these obstacles, truth will find a way, and truth will set us free. Peace and unity for Peru and for the world, for all those on the planet.
Ama Yuyacuspa, buscando el desarrollo de nuestro.
Let us seek the development of our peoples, presidents of the world. Together, let us work together without hating one another. Let us work for the development of our peoples. Yes to life, no to violence, and no to war. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Peru. The Assembly will hear an address by His Majesty King Abdullah II Ibn al-Hussein, King of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. I request protocol to escort His Majesty and invite him to address the Assembly.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr.
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful.
General Assembly, and another occasion when I stand before you to address the same issue, the conflict in the Middle East. And not for the first time, developments on the ground have made me question the worth and utility of words in capturing the magnitude of the crisis. Yet not speaking about it would signal acceptance of the situation and abandonment of our humanity. And that I will not do. Our UN General Assembly was born 80 years ago, pledging to learn from, not repeat, history. The world vowed never again. However, for almost as long, Palestinians have been living through a cruel cycle of yet again, bombed indiscriminately, yet again, killed, injured, and maimed, yet again, displaced and dispossessed, yet again, denied rights, dignity, their basic humanity, yet again. So I must ask, how long will it be before we find a resolution to this conflict, one that safeguards the rights of all sides and allows a level of normalcy in the lives of the families at its core? How long will it be before I stand before you and speak not of suffering and devastation in my region, but of prospect, prosperity, and potential? Sadly, this is not the only conflict in our world. And some may say that other wars are also devastating. But the Palestinian-Israeli conflict remains unique. It is the longest standing conflict in the world. An illegal occupation of a helpless population by a self-declared democratic nation, and a flagrant violation of repeated UN resolutions, international law, and human rights conventions. A failure that should have elicited outrage and action, especially from major democracies. Instead, it has been met with decades of inertia. My friends, the war in Gaza marks one of the darkest moments in this institution's history. But although it is today's horror, the injustice stretches back decades. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict has been on the UN agenda throughout its 8 decades of existence. How long will we be satisfied with condemnation after condemnation without concrete action? When it comes to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, it seems that what unfolds in the halls of power is theory. The struggles and suffering on the ground is reality. For decades, we have seen several attempts to achieve a solution by interim agreements and temporary stopgaps, none that delivered on the end game. In fact, many would argue these processes served as a distraction as Israel grabbed more land, expanded illegal settlements, demolished homes, and displaced entire neighborhoods. Muslim and Christian holy sites in Jerusalem have been vandalized and desecrated by those under government protection. And throughout all these years, Israeli families, too, have not been able to live in true security because military action cannot bring the safety they need. Nowhere is that more evident than in Gaza. More than 60,000 Palestinians killed, 50,000 children injured or killed, miles of burnt out rubble, neighborhoods, hospitals, schools, farms, even mosques and churches in ruins, widespread starvation. And what we are seeing is only a glimpse, because never in our modern history has the lenses of international media been obstructed like this from capturing the reality on the ground. Almost 2 years in, and the cruelty of this military campaign continues unabated. Furthermore, the current Israeli government's provocative calls for a so-called Greater Israel can only be realized through the blatant violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of its neighbors. And there is nothing great about that. I can't help but wonder if a similar outrageous call were made by an Arab leader, would it be met with the same global apathy? The international community must stop entertaining the illusion that this government is a willing partner for peace. Far from it. Its actions on the ground are dismantling the very foundations on which peace could stand, and intentionally burying the very idea of a Palestinian state. It has shown how little it respects the sovereignty of other countries, as we have seen in flagrant violations in Lebanon, Iran, Syria, Tunisia, and most recently, Qatar. And its hostile rhetoric calling for the targeting of Al-Aqsa Mosque will incite a religious war that would reach far beyond the region and lead to an all-out clash that no nation would be able to escape. How long before we hold all nations to the same standards? How long before we recognize the Palestinians as people who aspire to the same things you and I do, and we act on that recognition? How long before we recognize that statehood is not something Palestinians need to earn? It is not a reward. It is an indisputable right. In Jordan, we are determined to work for a world in which people are secure in their homes, are safe to practice their faiths, and are able to live and thrive in dignity. As custodians of Muslim and Christian holy sites in Jerusalem, we safeguard these holy places against actions that violate the city's legal and historical status quo. Compromising the delicate balance in the holy city will turn it into a tinderbox that ignites global conflict. And Jordan is serving as the main base for international humanitarian response in Gaza, working by all possible means to provide critical supplies of aid and food. And we appreciate our regional and international partners. I'm also immensely proud of the many Jordanians, including men and women of Jordan armed forces, who are at the heart of this effort. Ground convoys, aircraft crews, doctors, nurses, and mobile medical staff who work even under fire to provide relief. These and countless others carry forward Jordan's deep heritage of compassion and generosity to a people in grave need. My friends, amid such darkness, there is a glimmer on the horizon. We are seeing more nations stepping up on behalf of a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, one that ensures the release of all hostages, unhindered humanitarian aid, and support for the Palestinian people as they rebuild. We all know that force is no foundation for security. It is a prelude for greater violence. Repeated wars are teaching generations of Israelis and Palestinians that their only recourse is the gun. Security will only come when Palestine and Israel begin to coexist. Seems I have the same problem as President Trump. Begin to coexist side by side. This is the two-state solution, in line with international law and UN resolutions. An independent and viable Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital, alongside a secure Israel living in peace with its neighbors. For almost a quarter of a century, this has been the promise of the Arab Peace Initiative, in which Arab and Muslim partners around the globe extended their hand. My friends, for the past 2 years, we have finally seen the world's conscience stirring in the courage of ordinary people from every walk of life and every corner of the globe, raising their voices as one and declaring, "It has been too long." This United Nations must echo that call. It has been too long, and it must act on that call until peace is a reality. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the King of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Lee Jae-myung, President of the Republic of Korea. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
I would like to express my respect and gratitude to all members of the United Nations and staff of the UN Secretariat for their contribution to world peace and shared prosperity. I extend my sincere congratulations to Her Excellency Annalena Baerbock on assuming the presidency of the 18th session of the UN General Assembly. I also pay tribute to Secretary General Antonio Guterres for his unwavering dedication and hard work. I hope the 18th session of the UN General Assembly will achieve even more meaningful results under their outstanding leadership. Madam President, Mr. Secretary, and distinguished delegates, this year is a meaningful year marking the 80th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. The past 80 years of the UN have been a valuable journey of protecting the dignity and values of humanity and at seeking a path forward for future generations. If someone asks what the UN has achieved, I would confidently reply, look at the 80-year history of the Republic of Korea. It is no exaggeration to say that the Republic of Korea's history, dotted with challenges and responses, is the history of the United Nations, which has constantly confronted enormous challenges facing humanity. Liberated from colonial rule the very year that the United Nations was founded, the Republic of Korea emerged from the scars of division and ashes of war through UN assistance, maintaining national identity while achieving industrialization and blooming into a democracy. Therefore, the Republic of Korea in itself is a country that has proven the value of the UN's existence. Whenever the Republic of Korea revived the hopes of lives as precious as the weight of the universe amidst horrific wars and disasters, the UN flag fluttered at the center of that intense solidarity. The United Nations has strived to provide equal rights and opportunities to everyone without discrimination, and has provided education and vaccines to make children's lives blossom. The small country in the East, which rose with the support of the UN and the international community, has become a proud UN member that is drawing the world's attention. It is raising its role and responsibility as a member of the international community more rapidly than any other country. There were times when democracy and peace were in crisis, but each time the Republic of Korea rose with indomitable strength. Even a safe coup could not break the people of the Republic of Korea's strong will, desiring democracy and peace. The revolution of light that the people of the Republic of Korea achieved against the darkness of the insurrection last winter was a historic moment that demonstrated the brilliant achievement of the UN spirit. The remarkable resilience and strength of democracy that the Republic of Korea has shown will be ours as well as that of the entire world. I need you to take my hand and guide me away from all this, away to where the light shines through, to where the flowers bloom. As the novelist Han Gang, laureate of the Nobel Prize in Literature, wrote, the Republic of Korea will be a milestone of light for all those who join the journey toward democracy. Today, at the UN General Assembly, where world peace and humanity's shared prosperity is discussed, I proudly announce that a new Republic of Korea, which will be a beacon of light for global citizens, has completely returned to the international community. Thank you. The Republic of Korea, which has grown thanks to the support and assistance of the UN, will not hesitate to take on the role of a leading nation, generously sharing its experience and history of restoring democracy. Despite ceaseless efforts from all corners of the world, the international community's determination and aspiration to maintain international peace and security 80 years ago still remains an unfinished task for everyone. 280 million people are still in a state of extreme hunger. Armed conflicts around the world, including in Ukraine and the Middle East, as well as the climate crisis, which has already become a real problem, threaten the survival of humanity. The answer lies in the wisdom of the pioneers who founded the United Nations, as well as the path that the people of the Republic of Korea demonstrated. There is only one way: more democracy. The people-centered government of the Republic of Korea, through the power of collective intelligence, is ceaselessly attempting innovations, seeking better alternatives in democracy. The way to solve common challenges facing the international community is no different. When all the countries experiencing the same problems gather here at the United Nations and continue multilateral cooperation, putting their heads together, we will all be able to move toward a bright future of peace and prosperity. I look forward to the UN 80 initiative presented by the Secretary General, taking root as a vision that achieves UN's evolution and advancement in line with the demands of our time. I also hope the UN Security Council can increase the number of seats of non-permanent members reflecting changes in the international environment and enhance its effectiveness and representation. As a member of the UN Security Council for the term 2024 to 2025, the Republic of Korea is making efforts so that the UN Security Council can respond proactively to threats to the international peace and security. Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, and distinguished delegates, the Republic of Korea, having restored democracy, dreams of a better future. The Republic of Korea will fulfill its responsibility as a responsible global power that steadfastly upholds the values of freedom, human rights, inclusiveness, and solidarity championed by the United Nations. We will further develop our institutions and cultures so that everyone residing in the Republic of Korea, both nationals and foreigners, can be respected as an equal member of society in all fields of life. The Republic of Korea will strengthen and lead cooperation with the international community while realizing the value of respect for human rights. In a time of crisis where immediate survival is urgent, words like solidarity, coexistence, and cooperation may feel somewhat distant. However, humanity has always dreamed of hopes as high as its deep despair, and has achieved the progress we see today through a passion for a better tomorrow. The more difficult the times are, the more we must return to the basic spirit of the UN, which is trust in universal values of humankind. Just as the determination to not pass down the devastation of wars led to the founding of the UN and has prevented conflicts and preserved peace, we today must cooperate more, trust more, and join hands more firmly in order to build a better future, a better world for future generations. Democratic Korea will lead the way in multilateral cooperation toward a sustainable future.
Peace is a value that is more important than anything else. In the Republic of Korea, as well as elsewhere in the world, peace is the basic foundation for democracy and economic development. The disputes and conflicts we are currently facing vividly show how easily the ideals of human dignity and sustainable development can crumble without peace. Today, the Republic of Korea is fulfilling its responsibility as a key contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping and peacebuilding activities. Our brave soldiers, who have steadfastly defended the Republic of Korea, a divided nation, are helping to pave the way towards sustainable peace led by the UN. Threats to peace are not only physical elements. In an era where artificial intelligence technology is critical to security capabilities and cyber attacks threaten national security, we must confront not only visible enemies, but also invisible enemies. If we passively let ourselves be dragged along by the changes of the AI era, we will meet a dystopia of deepening polarization and inequality, unable to shake off the dark shadows of human rights abuses caused by the misuse of technology. However, if we proactively respond to these changes, we can use the high productivity as a driving force to build a foundation for innovation and prosperity, and create a useful base for strengthening direct democracy. I hope the open debate that I will preside over as UN Security Council President tomorrow will significantly contribute to the international community's efforts to promote the responsible use of AI. Furthermore, we intend to share our vision for the future of AI through the APEC AI initiative at the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting, which will be held in Gyeongju, Korea next month. we will strive to ensure that the vision of AI for all, where advances in cutting-edge technology contribute to the universal values of humanity, becomes a new normal for the international community. AI-driven technological innovations will be an important new tool for solving global challenges like the climate crisis. Over the past 80 years, the United Nations has paved the way for sustainable development and spearheaded efforts to address climate crisis threatening the survival of humanity. Nations around the world must respond to these efforts. The Republic of Korea is pursuing a great energy transition, leveraging science and technology and digital innovation to increase energy efficiency and expand the share of renewable energy. We will submit a responsible, nationally determined contribution within this year, joining the united will of the international community. At the 4th UN Ocean Conference that will be co-hosted by the Republic of Korea and Chile in 2028, we will also work to build substantive solidarity for the sustainable development of oceans. Such efforts by the Republic of Korea to actively address global challenges are based on a firm commitment to fulfilling humanity's shared promise of sustainable development. Since the United Nations established the Sustainable Development Goals 10 years ago, the international community has made much progress in eradicating poverty and reducing inequality. However, the demand for development financing is continuously increasing, and the most vulnerable are still suffering. Let us squarely face this grave reality and create new momentum for change. We must move toward structurally reforming global development governance while enhancing the quality of financial resources. I trust that we will pull together in order to bring about more cases like the Republic of Korea growing and developing from an aid recipient country to an aid donor country. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations, as well as the 80th anniversary of the division of the Korean Peninsula. New challenges, as well as unresolved tasks, await us. Democratic Korea will begin a new journey toward peaceful coexistence and shared growth on the Korean Peninsula. The first step will be to restore broken inter-Korean trust and shift to a stance of mutual respect. The government of the Republic of Korea clearly reaffirms that it respects the North's current system, that it will not pursue any form of unification by absorption, and that it has no intention of engaging in hostile acts. Based on these three principles, we intend to end the vicious cycle of unnecessary inter-Korean military tension and hostile acts. That is a reason why we have proactively taken measures, including halting the launch of leaflets and suspending broadcasts toward the North. Going forward, the government of the Republic of Korea will consistently seek a path to reduce military tensions and restore inter-Korean trust. The most certain peace is a state where there is no need to fight. Through comprehensive dialogue centered on exchange, normalization, and denuclearization, in other words, END, we must end the era of hostility and confrontation on the Korean Peninsula and usher in a new era of peaceful coexistence and shared growth. The fact that exchanges and cooperation are a shortcut to peace is a timeless lesson demonstrated by the history of fraught inter-Korean relations. By gradually expanding inter-Korean exchanges and cooperation, we will pave the way for sustainable peace on the Korean Peninsula. It is crucial for both the ROK and the DPRK, as well as the international community, to work together to establish peace on the Korean Peninsula. While striving to advance inter-Korean relations, we will provide our active support and cooperation for efforts to normalize relations with the international community, including between the United States and the DPRK. Denuclearization is undoubtedly a grave task, but it is time to seek realistic and rational solutions based on a cool-headed perception that denuclearization cannot be achieved in the short term. The international community must gather its wisdom in a pragmatic and phased solution, beginning with a stop in the sophistication of nuclear and missile capabilities, going through a reduction process, and reaching dismantlement. Realizing lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula would present new hope and possibility to humanity suffering from conflict. The Republic of Korea will end the Cold War on the Korean Peninsula through the END initiative and fulfill its responsibility and role to contribute to world peace and prosperity. A future where people from different nations cooperate and overcome global challenges together may sound like a rosy, dream-like vision. However, this is by no means an impossible dream. Peace is not merely the absence of armed conflict, but the realization of a community where differences are respected and people coexist. As long as respect and aspiration for diversity is inside us, we can always unite and embrace one another. K-culture is connecting people all over the world beyond borders, language, and cultural differences. The success and spread of K-culture prove that universal empathy is possible, transcending differences in all backgrounds. Gathering the energy of solidarity, coexistence, and consideration, the Republic of Korea, having ushered in a new diplomatic republic, is ready to move toward a sustainable future and a new page in human history. Though a difficult journey is expected, humanity has been able to grow and come this far by not giving up on challenges, even in the face of adversity. As the people of the Republic of Korea raised colorful cheering sticks in the face of a crisis in democracy, I call on the international community and the United Nations to lift the lantern of hope that will light the future of humanity. The Republic of Korea will boldly lead the way toward a new era of peaceful coexistence and shared growth on the Korean Peninsula toward a better future together. Thank you very much for your attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Korea. The Assembly will hear an address by His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al-Thani, Amir of the State of Qatar. I request protocol to escort His Highness and invite him to address the Assembly.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, most compassionate, most merciful, Your Excellency, President of the General Assembly, Your Excellency, Mr. Secretary General, may the peace of God be upon you. The United Nations has been established 8 decades ago on the basis of principles that humanity has reached after 2 world wars. These rules are based on the maintenance of international peace and security and the respect for human dignity and state sovereignty and a non-interference in internal affairs, and to cooperate for the benefit of our peoples. This means if we allow violations to continue. It means allowing the rule of the jungle, where perpetrators and violators enjoy benefits just because they can. This is the political realism that we are facing, that has been reduced to the ability to impose a status quo. This is a crisis. Such conduct finds that violators consider that tolerating them is a weakness. What must prioritize the discussion in the international community now is how to restore collective security as per the UN Charter, and how to restore the legitimacy of the international system. Your Excellencies, as you know, Doha on the 9th of September has suffered a treacherous attack that targeted the negotiating delegation of Hamas in a residential neighborhood that includes schools and diplomatic missions. As a result of this attack, 6 martyrs have fallen, including a Qatari national who serves in the internal security forces, and 18 people have been injured. This aggression was a violation against our sovereignty and a blatant violation that is unjustified of international law. But the whole world was shocked because of the circumstances of this heinous act, which we have classified as state terrorism. Unlike the claim of the Prime Minister of Israel, this attack is not a legitimate right to follow perpetrators of terrorism. It is an act of a diplomacy that is dedicated to political assassinations, and it undermines any diplomatic efforts aimed at ending the genocide against the people in Gaza. It is also an attempt to kill politicians who are members of a delegation that engages in negotiations with Israel while they were studying an American proposal. As you know, Qatar hosts, as a mediator during the negotiations, hosts delegations of Hamas and Israel. Qatari mediation has, in fact, achieved, in cooperation with Egypt and the USA, the release of hostages. And the last agreement was negated by Israel unilaterally, preventing an ability to reach a permanent ceasefire and the release of all hostages and the withdrawal of the occupying forces from the Gaza Strip and the humanitarian access and the release of Palestinian prisoners. They visit our country and plot to attack it. They negotiate with delegations and plot to assassinate the members of the negotiation teams. It is difficult to cooperate with such a mentality that does not respect the most minimum standards of cooperation. It is impossible. Is this not the definition of a rote government? The delegation, they consider negotiations a continuation of war in other means and a way to delude the Israeli public opinion. If the release of Israeli hostages is the end of war, the government of Israel is abandoning the notion of releasing the hostages. Their goal is to destroy Gaza so that it is unlivable and where no one can study or receive treatment. In other words, end the viability of the Gaza Strip to displace its population. Therefore, the Israeli leader wants to continue war. He believes in what is called Greater Israel. He believes that war is an opportunity to expand settlements and to change the status quo in the holy sites, in Al-Quds al-Sharif. He also plots for attacks in the West Bank and expansion. This imposition is the goal of this war. This treacherous attack against the sovereignty of a Gulf state thousands of miles away has confirmed that the Israeli Prime Minister, who takes pride in changing the face of the Middle East, reveals an manifestation of Israel's ability to intervene wherever, however it desires. Arab countries and Muslim countries have warned, and that have held an emergency summit in Doha, have warned against the consequences of this delusion. Israel is not a democratic country surrounded by enemies, but in fact, it is an enemy to its surrounding neighbors, and it's engaged in a genocide. And its leader is proud of preventing the establishment of a Palestinian state. And he promises that such a state will never be established. And he takes pride in preventing peace with the Palestinians, and that he will prevent such peace in the future. Israel is surrounded by states either who have signed a peace agreement or who are committed to the Arab Peace Initiative. But Israel does not make do with truces and settlements. It desires to impose its will on its surrounding Arab neighbors. And everyone who believes its will is either anti-Semitic or and everyone who opposes its will is either anti-Semitic or a terrorist. Even Israel's allies realize this fact and reject it. And here we are today, where we witness an international solidarity movement that is similar to the international movement against apartheid last century. And I would be remiss not to express my appreciation with the solidarity we have received in Qatar after the attack, including the statement by the Security Council that has condemned the attack. Distinguished Excellencies, Qatar will remain true to its history and legacy, opposing the crimes that take place. We believe in the ability of reconciling interests with security. We will continue to speak truth, and we will engage in diplomacy when our enemies find it easier to use weapons. We have engaged to mediate an end to the war and allow for humanitarian access and release hostages, and we have faced disinformation campaigns. However, these campaigns will not deter us. We will continue our efforts in cooperation and partnership with Egypt and the United States of America. We are firmly convinced that peace can only be achieved in our region through a firm position from the Security Council, from accepting and tolerating the occupation's crimes, until allowing to the Palestinian people to enjoy their right to self-determination and establish their state with East Jerusalem as its capital on the borders of 1967 as per UN resolutions and the two-state solution that has been the consensus of the international community. We appreciate the role of states that have recognized the state of Palestine. There is no doubt that such recognition is morally important because it sends a message that violence and more violence will not succeed in liquidating a just cause such as the cause of Palestine, and we urge more states to recognize the state of Palestine. We believe that instability knows no border and that humanity's destiny is intertwined. Therefore, Qatar has continued its diplomatic efforts to contribute to the settlement of other crises, such as in Ukraine and wars in Africa. And our persistence have continued with partners in Africa in order to draft peace agreements. Most importantly was the signing of a declaration of principles in Doha between the DRC and the Congo River Alliance in March. Our efforts support the leadership of the U.S. to achieve a peace agreement in the east of the country, and Qatar will continue to engage as an international partner in order to achieve the peaceful settlement of conflicts and to seize opportunities to establish global peace. Your Excellencies, some states in our region still suffer the lack of security and stability. However, there is hope through some positive developments. In our dear Syria, since the end of last year, is going through a new phase that we hope will be a path towards achieving the aspirations of the Syrian people towards stability, development, and the rule of law after the end of a dark phase of the country's history. Egypt has stood by the Syrian people throughout the previous years. I recalled and urged to support Syria from this podium, even when it seemed to fall off the international agenda. The international community is called upon to assist Syria now in order to succeed through the transition phase after decades of suffering. Our experience in other Arab countries has taught us that building state institutions and establishing relations between a state and others is based on equality, and internal stability on the basis of respect for diversity are paramount issues at this stage. Qatar will not spare an effort to provide the necessary support to our brothers and sisters in Syria. And we have no doubt that the Syrians will be able to overcome this phase and to reject sectarianism in all its forms, and that they will reject external interference, especially the Israeli attempts to divide Syria and the conduct of Israel that is as though all areas south of Damascus are areas of Israeli influence. The Middle East has also witnessed positive developments through the election of President Imad Joseph Aoun in Lebanon and the appointment of Mr. Nawaf Salam as a prime minister, which is a step towards stability in the country. Qatar will continue to support Lebanon government and people and institutions, and will continue to support the Lebanese army. We emphasize the need to implement Security Council Resolution 1701 and the withdrawal of Israeli forces from the areas it occupied during the last war, and to end Israeli interference in internal Lebanese affairs. For Sudan, the people in Sudan continue to suffer an unprecedented humanitarian crisis because of the continued violence. We call once again on all parties to prioritize the national interest and to engage in a comprehensive dialogue that leads to a permanent peace and that preserves the unity of Sudan and its territorial integrity and independence, and that achieves development and stability. We declare our support for all international efforts that aim to achieve this goal. Distinguished Excellencies, Doha has always been a global capital that hosts major events in all spheres, and an area where leaders convene and decision makers from around the world to engage in negotiations and the formulation of solutions. Doha will host the Second World Summit for Social Development from the 4th to 6th November this year, and we look forward to welcoming you all during this conference. There is no doubt that the trust of the international community in Qatar is based on our successes in the past throughout the years. And accordingly, based on this legacy, we have submitted our application to host the Olympics, believing that sports is not just competition, but a bridge between cultures and a means to promote peace and understanding. And as such, we have also organized and hosted the FIFA World Cup, proving that we are able of hosting sporting events of this magnitude. In conclusion, the state of Qatar, realizing the seriousness of the challenges facing the international community, commits to our partnership in seeking truth, peace, and justice in international relations. Thank you, and may the peace of God be upon you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Emir of the State of Qatar. The Assembly will now hear an address by Her Excellency Jennifer Gillings-Simons, the President of the Republic of Suriname. I request the protocol to escort Her Excellency and invite her to address the Assembly.
Good morning. Madam President, we are here to commemorate in this special moment in history as we celebrate the United Nations 80th anniversary. And this 80th anniversary of the General Assembly coincides with the 50th anniversary of the independence of the Republic of Suriname and our membership of this organization. On behalf of the government and the people of the Republic of Suriname, I express sincere congratulations to the international community on this occasion. It is clear that a journey that spans over 80 years cannot be and has not been without challenges. The United Nations played, in some instances, an important role in ending colonial rule, worked on advancing human rights, and often provided hope and a future to the most vulnerable in our global community. This is also the organization that provided a voice to the global community and worked to establish a balanced world order aimed at adopting a framework for sustainable development agenda and contribute significantly to advancing human rights, more specifically the rights of women and children. The organization promoted education for all and universal access to health care. In some instances, the peaceful resolution of conflicts was achieved, preventing misery and saving human lives. Madam President, on the other hand, we must admit that the UN, at other times, regrettably has been unsuccessful in avoiding conflicts, wars, and violations of human rights. As we look at the world today, we see that in Europe, war has returned. Elsewhere, wars are displacing millions, killing many, and threatening global security and peace. In other countries and regions, for instance in the Middle East, we have witnessed unspeakable terror at the hands of terrorist organizations. The UN was not able to prevent that. At this moment, there are increased occurrences of grave violations of human rights and more specifically, the rights of children. For example, in Gaza, it is unbearable to even think about their suffering. Also, within our own region, which is the Caribbean, we have not been spared of rising tensions. It is with heightened concern that we noted the Secretary General's recent briefing on the Security Council meeting on the situation in Haiti, mentioning that the Haitians are enduring a perfect storm of suffering. Haiti is still paying a hefty price for being the first to throw away the shackles of slavery in the region of the Caribbean. Our hearts go out to the people of Haiti. Suriname strongly reiterates its position that conflicts should primarily be resolved through dialogue. And we remind the international community that Latin America and the Caribbean are proclaimed a zone of peace. We do not want military aggression in our region. Madam President, this is the moment, on the 80th anniversary, we should reflect and ponder on the next 80 years. What do we have to change and what needs to be done differently? We all must underscore and repeat it ceaselessly today that the United Nations will only be successful if all nations, without exception, adhere to the resolutions we adopt. We can only keep the peace if we stop allowing that the votes of all the countries in the world can be nullified by one veto. Today, partially because of the work done by our organization, some poor countries have developed substantially, economically and otherwise. They have become powers who can't be ignored any longer. We have to remind ourselves that the world in which the United Nations was established 80 years ago does no longer exist. The task ahead, therefore, is that we, in the first place, renew our vows, recommit to the principles and objectives of the Charter of our organization, and recognize all the voices in the world, because people from all regions should have opportunities for a dignified life. Furthermore, the UN should adjust to the world we currently live in. This means, for example, the Security Council should expand to include all nations who exert major influence in the world. Exclusion of these players will only increase the risk of conflict and obstruct the beneficial cooperation necessary for humanity to develop and prosper. It is of great importance that all economically and otherwise strong nations and countries maintain a healthy competition that promotes the scientific advancement we need for sustainable development. On the other hand, these countries need to work together to guarantee global peace, so crucial for the existence and growth of the developing states and for their own countries. In this context, Suriname endorses the inclusion of, amongst others, Brazil, India, and the representation of the African continent for equal membership of the Council. Equally, we support the CARICOM position for a non-permanent rotating seat for the small island developing states and low-lying coastal countries. I would also like to remind the member states that my country, Suriname, has presented its candidacy as a non-permanent member of the Council for the period 2043 to 2044. Madam President, the United Nations must be a genuine unity of nations. If our organization, moving forward, wants to play a crucial role in creating a prosperous future for humanity, we have no choice than to genuinely unite all of us. Suriname stands firmly for global peace, for the rule of law, and for the equal value of every human life. Considering this, Suriname once again calls for the lifting of the long-standing, unjust embargo against Cuba, bringing misery to its people. Madam President, Suriname is a country with people of indigenous, Maroon, Javanese, Hindustani, Creole, African, Chinese, and European descent. We all live together in a mosaic of cultures and faiths. The persons from Surinamese origin living abroad are part of this mosaic of our population and can contribute to the socio-economic development of the nation. We consider this diversity a great asset. Actually, Suriname does not have diversity. Suriname is diversity, and we keep working together to protect and grow our national unity for our own well-being and as an example of harmony in this often divided world. My country also carries immense natural wealth, and it is our vision to create an economy that is resilient, sustainable, and inclusive. Together, we strive to build this more diverse economy by developing, among others, our tourism and agricultural sectors, strengthen our educational system, and work towards universal access to basic health care. Suriname has a vast tourism potential. With its green and lustrous hinterland, many waterfalls, rapids, and great rivers for relaxation, as well as for unforgettable adventures, if you're inclined to that. Rich biodiversity, cultural treasures, and the UNESCO-acknowledged historical city of Paramaribo. Through cooperation in the agriculture sector with our neighbors, we aim at improving food security within Suriname and the Caribbean community. My government views energy security as a strategic priority for national development, regional stability, and economic resilience. With an investment of more than $10 billion for the development of our offshore oil and gas, the country is getting a new beginning, a new start that will contribute significantly to our economic growth. However, we know oil and gas revenues should not be the sole fundament of our economic development. Hence, we need investments in relevant sectors in our country. We are steadily advancing our energy transition. While we already source about 50% of our energy needs through hydropower, we are moving toward natural gas and other forms of renewable energy as part of our long-term vision, because we know climate change is a fact. Madam President, I firmly believe that education is the foundation upon which every prosperous society is built. We are committed to invest in our education system, our teachers, our children and youth. The future of any country depends on the talent and skills of its people. My country reaffirms strongly its commitment to upholding the rights of indigenous and tribal communities, ensuring that their livelihoods, tradition, knowledge systems are respected and preserved, and the acknowledgement of their collective land rights. Strengthening our institutions is high on our agenda. Suriname has worked tirelessly on the prevention of diseases, and despite challenges, we have achieved results that we as a country can be proud of. As of June 30, 2025, Suriname has officially been declared malaria-free by the World Health Organization after 30 years of continuous fight against this disease. the first in the Amazon region to receive such a recognition. We're aware of the responsibility to remain vigilant as government as well as a community to ensure that these gains are sustained. Suriname's example showcases that we too can surely make a valuable contribution in combating infectious diseases. Madam President, the Caribbean community is expanding its outreach. And in this light, Suriname also welcomes the recently concluded Second Africa CARICOM Summit held in the Republic of Ethiopia. This, Madam President, honors the historic, cultural, and human bonds between the regions of the Caribbean and Africa. Suriname also acknowledges the CARICOM 10-point plan for reparatory justice, which has our full and strong endorsement. Slavery was a crime, is a crime against humanity, and we're talking about reparations, yes. We will furthermore continue to contribute with CARICOM, aiming at enhancing the organization's geopolitical influence. Despite our commitment as a country to the Paris Agreement 10 years ago, we see that the climate crisis is worsening. It's worse than we feared. Our countries have least contributed to climate change and carbon emissions, but are hit the hardest by its effects, directly impacting the livelihood and economic growth of our peoples. Suriname calls for the urgent attention of the international community to address the detrimental impact of climate change facing the small island developing states and countries with low-lying coastal areas. Our forests stand strong. More than 90% of our land is covered by rainforest. And this makes us the most forested country in the world. Your eyes have never seen so much green. Suriname is one of the 3 carbon-negative countries on Earth. Since 1992, our forest has absorbed nearly 290 million tons of carbon, and each year we capture more than we emit, and we want to keep it that way. The protection and conservation of our forest has been a priority. It doesn't stand by default, but by design. We have been logging sustainably for decades, and did so with the Sustainable Tropical Rainforest Management System developed in Suriname, an ecological approach to forestry. Also, the indigenous and tribal communities protect the forest by their continued stewardship. We are proud of the way we did it, but pride alone does not pay the bills and does not develop the indigenous and tribal communities. Madam President, we must not forget that these forests, our forests, are in competition with vast resources such as gold, diamond, bauxite, and more. We will need to make difficult choices. We want to keep our forest coverage at a minimum of 90%. But we cannot do it alone. The time has come for the world's largest emitters to share this responsibility, not only with words, but with action, justice, and finance. Suriname strongly calls for global action, predictable climate finance for high forested, low deforestation countries, fair recognition of real carbon removals, and direct support for the communities who live in and protect these forests. Suriname, Madam President, therefore endorses the initiative of the COP30 presidency to launch the Tropical Forest Forever facility and calls upon the international community to contribute to its success. Suriname, as mentioned previously, takes pride in being an example of peaceful coexistence, having different cultures, religions, and the traditions to live together in respect and solidarity. This is our gift to the world. The second gift, because we also have a forest that is delivering services to the whole world. This gift proves that harmony can prevail. As stated upon our admission to the United Nations in 1975, our republic indicated our willingness to engage with the international community. My country reiterates its strong commitment to multilateralism, one of humanity's most important achievements, which needs our protection in this time of change. In closing, aggression and military force should be replaced with peaceful resolution and dialogue, because it doesn't solve problems, it creates destruction and misery. As a matter of urgency, I call on every member state to keep the peace, protect the planet and all human rights. Suriname has shown the world that living sustainably together is possible. We are really better together. Thank you, Grand Tanye, and may God be with you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Suriname. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Cadena Nauseda, President of the Republic of Lithuania. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Dear Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. 80 years ago, humanity, emerging from the Second World War, embarked on a long road towards peace. Building on the solid foundation of the rules-based international order, our forefathers created the United Nations and its institutional system. This system was never perfect. Many nations, Lithuania included, had to struggle for decades, seeking freedom, independence, and sovereignty. Many people suffered war, famine, and premature death. And yet, it was the best international order that we have ever. The United Nations system embodied the great hope that nourishes the human soul and guides our actions for the universal good. Together we succeeded in condemning war and conquest, at least in theory, if not always in practice. To this day, even the worst aggressors feel ashamed to openly conquer, destroy, and enslave. Instead, they talk about special military operations and the need to protect those who frankly do not want to be protected. This shame is a significant achievement of our time. To the extent that current international norms limit the behavior of offenders, they help countless people to survive, escape torture, or even prosper. Thus, it is an ever-growing concern to witness these same norms being subjected to increasingly open and brutal attacks. Our international order is being slowly eroded by the irresponsible actions of those who should know better. The world is turning into a much more dangerous place. We have seen this before. We cannot ignore the striking parallels between the present day and the events of 1938, a time when the world chose appeasement over international law and diplomacy over deterrence, culminating in the infamous Munich Pact. That was a short-sighted attempt to satisfy a dangerous revisionist aggressor by giving away the territory of a sovereign nation. It proved to be a complete failure. The Munich Pact not only emboldened the Nazi regime, but also opened the door for Soviet expansion. Soon after, the secret protocols of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact carved Europe into spheres of influence and sealed the fate of many independent states. As Europe descended into another great war, Lithuania and the other Baltic states were illegally occupied, annexed, and brutalized. After regaining the independence 35 years ago, Lithuania feels a duty to guard the bitter memory of past mistakes. Never again will we place our hopes in appeasement. Never again will we stand aside. Never again shall Pandora's box be opened. In 1938, it was Czechoslovakia that was abandoned. Today, we cannot abandon Ukraine alone. The war in Ukraine is well into its 4th year. The international community has not done enough to stop aggressor. This is a quest that goes far beyond the usual lines that keep different nations apart. What matters is not the distinction between large and small, or between global north and global south nations, but the basic principles of the UN Charter, which guarantee peace and security across the globe. If one UN member is attacked with impunity year after year by a permanent member of the Security Council, what does that mean for the rest of us? When power replaces law and fear silences the truth, the foundations of the global order begin to crack. And then nobody can feel safe anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, the effects of Russia's war against Ukraine are being felt across the world. This war has sparked crises in energy, migration, and food security, while also deepening global poverty, hunger, environmental damage, and climate change. It all began with the illegal occupation of Crimea in 2014 and escalated into a full-scale invasion marked by systematic war crimes. The targeted destruction of civilian infrastructure, indiscriminate missile attacks, and the forced deportation of thousands of Ukrainian children are not isolated abuses. These are calculated efforts to erase Ukraine's identity and undermine its sovereignty and territorial integrity, all in open defiance of the United Nations Charter. Let me be clear, Lithuania will never recognize Russia's illegal occupation and annexation of Ukrainian lands. Ukraine's borders are not up for negotiation. Attempts to redraw them by force are unacceptable. The United Nations Charter is not a menu to pick from. It is a binding foundation of international order. Ukraine is also not the only target. Russia continues to occupy two Georgian regions, destabilizes Moldova, and uses proxies and mercenaries to spread instability across the Sahel, the Middle East, and beyond. These are not isolated episodes. They are part of a calculated policy to undermine international norms and export chaos for strategic gain. Russia is not acting alone. The countries enabling Russia's war against Ukraine also violate international law. They prolong the war and deepen unnecessary suffering. Their actions damage us all, every sovereign nation. Lithuania therefore calls on the international community to maintain strong political, military, humanitarian, and economic support for Ukraine. Having already provided more than 1 billion euros in assistance, half of which for reconstruction and long-term recovery, we are setting an example to follow. It is equally vital that the international community stop buying Russia's energy resources. Without all that oil and gas money, Moscow's war machine would finally stop. If history is any indicator, Russia will never stop using energy for its geopolitical goals. Wherever Russian energy resources flow, corruption, blackmail, and sabotage will follow. Let me remind you, this is a country that understands only the language of force. Ukraine's ability to deter aggression will be the decisive factor in the future. Moreover, peace will never be sustainable without justice. Russia's numerous war crimes, from mass killings and attacks on hospitals to the abduction, deportation, and indoctrination of children, demand accountability. My country strongly supports the Special Tribunal for the Crime of Aggression under the auspices of the Council of Europe. We call on all states to endorse this initiative. Accountability must have real consequences, legal, political, and financial. As a co-founder of Register of Damage for Ukraine, Lithuania calls on all eligible states to join this vital effort. Russia's frozen assets must eventually be used to help Ukraine defend itself and rebuild. I also cannot stress strongly enough that the return of all deported Ukrainian children and illegally detained civilians must be a global priority. We urge all states and institutions to strengthen international efforts and to ensure their safe homecoming. Ladies and gentlemen, as crucial as Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine is, it is only part of the broader global upheaval. Lithuania watches the current situation in the Middle East with deep concern. We join the international community in calling for the full and immediate implementation of the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. To prevent starvation, humanitarian aid must be allowed to reach those in need without obstruction. At the same time, the unconditional release of all remaining Israeli hostages remains a crucial step towards ending hostilities. Lithuania is firmly committed to a just and lasting peace in the Middle East. We condemn all the actions that undermine this goal. The ongoing mediation efforts led by the United States, Qatar, and Egypt deserve our full support. There is no alternative but to revitalize a credible political process towards a two-state solution, ensuring that the state of Israel and an independent, democratic, contiguous, sovereign and viable state of Palestine can live side by side in peace, security, and mutual recognition, with Jerusalem as the future capital of both states. Sadly, many states remain trapped in cycles of conflict, crisis, and long-term fragility. It is our shared responsibility to support those in need as destabilization spreads far and wide across international borders, regions, and continents. Our attention must also focus on the growing challenge of disinformation, which is increasingly being used to undermine democratic institutions and destabilize entire nations and societies. Lithuania calls on all members of the international community to defend truth as the supreme value and to fight attempts to rewrite history. Historical memory must be preserved. Ladies and gentlemen, as we face high global uncertainty, one choice remains entirely clear. Either we will repeat the mistakes of history, or we will find the resolve to defend the core principles of the United Nations. Today, Lithuania chooses to act. We call on the international community to respond to today's challenges with unity and determination. We call on the United Nations to return to its founding purpose, to prevent the scourge of war, to protect human dignity, and to uphold the rights of nations large and small. Together, we must ensure that no permanent seat on the Security Council grants any state permanent impunity. We must support those who defend the very principles of the UN Charter. In this spirit, I welcome the Secretary General's UNAT reform agenda, a timely blueprint for adapting this institution to the realities of today's world. His call for a more inclusive, effective, and accountable United Nations deserves our broad support. Lithuania stands firmly behind these efforts to reimagine multilateralism. We call on all states to strengthen our collective ability to act across all three pillars: peace and security, human rights, and development. Our message must be simple and straightforward. Aggression cannot win, and the principles of the UN Charter must prevail. Let us rise to the demands of this moment. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Lithuania. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Marcelo Rebelo da Sousa, the President of the Portuguese Republic. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, symbolic moment this one for United Nations, the celebration of 80 years, and for us, Portuguese, 70 years of membership. The time of judgment, of compromise, of renewal, multilateral ambition. Portugal is today what always aspired to be, an open country to the world, listening, dialoguing, building bridges, deeply multilateralist and guided by the Charter of United Nations. A world with more cooperation and respect for international law is safer, more predictable, stable, peaceful, prosperous, plural, representative, and able to respond collectively to global challenges. 70 years ago, we were living still in dictatorship. And we found in this community the space to rediscover the real values and contributing to global solutions. And even now, in a changed world, fragmented, polarized, unpredictable, this community is a key community to defend basic principles of a coexistence between nations, cultures, civilizations. And it is with this coherence and the sense of responsibility, with the conscience of the need of contributing, acting, and deciding, guided by values and principles, that will be candidates to the Security Council in 27-28, a decision we formalized in 2013. Excellencies, let me pay tribute to the former President of the General Assembly for his support to the adoption of the Pact for the Future. Let me congratulate the present President of this session, wishing the success in her term. But I would very specifically, and in Portuguese this time, say a word about the remarkable work of the Secretary-General António Guterres. O seu humanismo.
His humanism, devotion to international law, the reforms he has championed.
2017, que inclui agora,
now including UN 80 and the Pact for the Future, are testaments to his work and will be his legacy.
É orgulho para mim, having a Portuguese as Secretary-General of the United Nations, ter português como Secretário-Geral das Nações Unidas. Someone that is projecting a Portuguese way of acting in international relations, uma forma portuguesa de estar nas relações internacionais. He will always be supported by Portugal. Contará sempre com o apoio de Portugal. And I must congratulate him for his speech, because he said, I will never give up. I know him ever since we were teenagers. He never gave up, ever. And he's right. It's true we live at a time of multiple crises and persistent crises. Division, polarization, violations of international law, cleavage between power exercise and responsibility, technology and ethics, urgency of crisis and capacity of response and action. United Nations faces an existential moment. Without change, without renewal, the United Nations will be marginalized, and we could be left to the law of force. No G1, no G2, no G3, no G1 plus 1, 1 plus 2, or 2 plus 1 will be an alternative. No absence of multilateralism will avoid the need of multilateralism. The world is multipolar, will be multipolar. Just think of the situation in Ukraine or the situation in Middle East. In Ukraine, for years, and now for months, for 8 months, one is waiting the mediation of the most powerful in the world. Do we have a ceasefire? No, we don't. In the case of Middle East, we waited and waited for the intervention of the most powerful in the world. Did we have a ceasefire? Without the multipolar, multilateral intervention of so many countries, here in New York, with the recognition of the existence of the state of Palestine, some Europeans, others non-Europeans, we won't change soon. This means we need United Nations, we need multilateralism, we need dialogue between countries from every continent. And the same for international law. We need international law. We need international law for the reform of United Nations. We need international law as a foundation of peace and justice. A world governed by rules is a safer and more predictable and equitable world. we need the Charter of United Nations as a common compass. Of course, we must adjust United Nations, but we must never forget the lesson of the League of Nations. When one forgets the principles, when one abandons the principles on account of pure realpolitik, I mean the power or the powers of the moment, one forgets that no power is eternal. No personality is eternal. Empires went up and went down. We know by experience it. Colonial empires, European empires inside Europe, all kinds of empires went up and went down. We believe that in the reform of United Nations, we have three pillars: prevention, partnership, and protection. Preemptive action before the conflict, not just afterwards. Mediation, preventive diplomacy, intervention of the Secretary General and of the PBC. Avoiding distraction and institution collapse. Building peace, fighting against the deep causes of violence, promoting resilient and peaceful societies. But development, peace building without development, preventive action without development doesn't work. We co-presided, together with an African partner, Burundi, the preparation of the fourth conference on financing of development. Ideas, dialogue, determination, results. Without sustainable development, no lasting peace is possible. Never forget to implement the 2030 agenda and the reform of the international financial architecture. It's a priority involving the digital, the space, the artificial intelligence technologies as force for peace, not tools for domination. Bridging the digital and technological divides as central to build resilient societies. C'est aussi très fier que...
And with great pride, we share in the priority of prioritizing oceans, addressing climate change. We can talk about combating climate change, but we must first and foremost admit that there is this change. That's why we prepared for UNOC 2 in Lisbon, and we were at UNOC in Nice. We were one of the first European states to ratify the BBNJ Treaty. We project 27% of our marine surface area. That is 3% of the objective for 2030.
Speaking of the pillar of partnership, United Nations must deepen partnerships, strategic partnerships with regional organizations. Portugal has the experience that is very specific. Nós temos a experiência.
We have the experience of the community of Portuguese-speaking countries.
Speaking community, present in 9 countries, 4 continents, 1 language. Presentes em 9 países, 4 continentes, uma língua,
A language, a short platform with its own voice at the UN. We hosted the 10th Global Forum of the Alliance of Civilizations.
For the Alliance of Civilizations. Also, the conference, UN Conference on Racism. Portugal
hosted the first UN Conference on Racism, and we promoted the implementation of the Durban Declaration.
Formamos.
We are part of the Ibero-American community.
Indeed, Portugal feels like a kindred spirit of Latin America. We share common priorities, such as inclusive multilateralism, sustainable development, and social cohesion.
A nossa parceria
Our
South is made of respect and solidarity. Lançamos as primeiras
we launched the first EU-African Union summits.
Initiative of the first and second summits between European Union and the African Union. We cooperate actively with the PMA, CITES, and LLDC. At the same time, we think that protecting means also protecting the role of women, youth as agents of change, the access to education, leadership, political participation. The world needs more women and more youngest as leaders in the procedures of decision. Third pillar, protection. We participate for 65 years in peacekeeping. Thousands of armed forces and security forces participated in 25 missions in 4 continents, mostly in Africa. Peacekeeping now with 4 peace operations, a quick reaction force, punctual payment, example of intervention in every continent, defense of a predictable and stable financing, including for the missions that are promoted by Security Council or accepted by Security Council, but initiative of African Union. This year, we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the additional protocol to the Convention of Rights of Children involved in armed conflicts. It's a drama. It's a drama. Children going on being victims in every war scenario. We have the legal duty, the political and the moral duty of protecting them. And then, of course, humanitarian international law. One spoke of it, about the situation in areas of conflict. Geneva Conventions are not suggestions. They involve duties. We participated in the 6th Commission preparing the Convention on Crimes Against Humanity. Human rights. Human rights. Human rights mean personal rights, political rights, freedom of expression, economic rights, social, cultural rights, universal, interdependent, and inseparable. Não podemos ficar.
We cannot remain indifferent
concerning major crises. We just declared our decision of recognizing the state of Palestine. In the Middle East, now we think that the following step is creating conditions for a ceasefire, immediately releasing the hostages, humanitarian assistance, but also creating political, economic, and social conditions to strengthen the solution of 2 sovereign states, rebuilding economies and societies, giving an opportunity to peace, to the daily life of Israelis and Palestinians, so that they can live, not die. Live, not die. In Ukraine, sovereignty, independence, and integrity with global total ceasefire, immediate and unconditional, first step for a fair peace, respecting international law, and respecting the Charter of the United Nations. In Sudan, intervening to react much more quickly to perhaps the greatest humanitarian catastrophe in Africa. On Haiti,
in Haiti, where the suffering of the population is no longer tenable. This in light of the barbaric atrocities committed by criminal gangs and the recruitment of child soldiers. Decisive UN assistance to the multinational security support mission is required before it is too late.
Excellencies, at a time when we are witnessing the largest number of armed conflicts since the creation of the United Nations, Portugal is ready to take on greater responsibilities and represent a global voice in the Security Council, bringing the experience of almost lessons learned in recent decades and proximity to all the states here represented, without discrimination. And for that, our vision for the Security Council will act to prevent and creating partnership and protection, and with the reform of the Security Council to make it more representative and effective, to reflect the geopolitics of the 21st century and doesn't remain stuck in 1945, with representation of the African continent, with seats represented, and recognition of major emerging powers such as Brazil and India, with more transparent, a council that is more plural and consistent with the content and the spirit of the Charter. A Security Council which in 2024 met frequently since 1989. But it met frequently with less resolutions adopted and the highest number of vetoes casted. It's unacceptable that the use of veto continues to paralyze essential decisions. It is therefore unacceptable in the face of human suffering. The Charter is clear. A party to a conflict shall not be the judge of its own case. Portugal supports the ACT Group's code of conduct, measures to restrict the use of veto, and all initiatives that strengthen transparency and accountability within the Council.
A last word. Portugal is presenting itself to the Security Council without hidden agendas, but rather with an agenda aligned with the values and objectives of the UN, with humility, but with confidence, contributing to a council that is more effective, representative, and close to those who expect protection from it. We are a predictable country, a bridge builder, a reliable partner, an uncompromising defender of the UN Charter. It is in this spirit that we want to serve, that we reaffirm our commitment to the United Nations today, and that we hope will earn your trust for the future of the United Nations, but mostly for the future of the world. More peaceful, more just, more respectful of dignity, human dignity, in so many conflicts that represent a shame for all of us. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank His Excellency, the President of the Portuguese Republic. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Yomandu Usi, President of the Eastern Republic of Uruguay. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Señora Presidenta. President of the General Assembly, Secretary General, heads of state and government, representatives of international organizations, official delegations, ladies and gentlemen. I come from a republic that lies to the east of the Uruguay River, one which on maps, in history and in culture occupies a small corner of the southernmost tip of the world. This is a country of grasslands overlooking the ocean, which stands out for the tranquility and hospitality of its people. I come from a country where it is now common practice for a president to visit neighboring countries accompanied by his predecessors from other political parties. This is a country where the handover between governing parties does not trigger an institutional crisis. On the contrary, this handover represents business as usual. I come from a country whose president can walk among the people without security, can enjoy a football match standing in the stands like any other supporter. I come from a country whose political parties, almost all of them, more than half a century old, are always willing to agree on national solutions to national emergencies. Uruguayan solutions, as we call them. In saying this, I'm trying to express how Uruguay lives its profound vocation for peace and respect every day. I live in a country, of course, that does not stand on the threshold of paradise, since we are also facing fresh challenges in child poverty, public security, and social inequality, and on these issues also there is, generally speaking, national consensus. Our historically robust institutions and political system have allowed Uruguay to continue to stand out in the region for its high level of human development and its income distribution policies. It has allowed us to be a country with stable rules, where contracts are honored, where international commitments are respected, and where macroeconomic stability is a state policy. But this impressive record can also be seen beyond our borders, because Uruguay is recognized worldwide for its commitment to peace, its tireless pursuit of the peaceful resolution of conflicts, its unfettered respect for international law as the greatest guarantee of the sovereignty of peoples, and for being a fraternal and hospitable land for migrants from all latitudes. From that small country which breeds tolerance, dialogue, and agreement as the historical key to coexistence, and which lies on a continent free of conflict and interstate wars, we come to this assembly to join efforts to contribute to stability and peace in an increasingly tumultuous and challenging world. The growing geopolitical tension and increase in conflicts, together with the underfunding of efforts for a peaceful and rules-based global order, are posing enormous challenges on a planetary scale. A few facts suffice to illustrate this. According to the 2025 Global Peace Index, in 2023 there were 59 interstate conflicts. This is the highest number since the end of the Second World War. In 2024, global military expenditure rose by almost 10% in real terms when compared to 2023. This represents the largest annual increase since the end of the Cold War. We're talking about military expenditure of $2.7 trillion. We're not only talking about increased conflict between nations, nor of rapidly growing military expenditures to sustain this. but we're also talking about new forms of cruelty and death that wars now bear. We are well aware that since the very birth of civilization, the absence of violence or war has perhaps been nothing more than a pipe dream. But in our time, technological progress has unleashed other, much more perverse means of waging war, such as the use of military practices aimed at sowing fear, terror, and death among the civilian population. Let it be very clear. We condemn all forms of terrorism, since it constitutes, among other things, a despicable act of cowardice. There is another perspective, a current perspective, one that leads us to believe that the main objective of current wars seems to be the systematic practice of extermination. The end has never justified the means. We must banish that old precept that war is the continuation of politics by other means. All war is criminal, irrespective of where it occurs, irrespective of the God invoked to justify it, and it will always deserve our most visceral condemnation. It is true that every nation has the right to its own territory and government. It's true that they have the right to establish a level of self-determination that allows a nation to coexist with other peoples. And the value of the United Nations is precisely to ensure that these principles are realized in a peaceful and civilized manner. No state that claims to be democratic and to live under the rule of international law can, even under the legitimate right to defend itself against terrorism, exercise barbarity against any civilian population, least of all against especially vulnerable and defenseless persons. Since 1948, Uruguay has maintained a consistent and steadfast position in line with the principles of self-determination and peaceful coexistence. Our historic stances on the main global conflicts, especially that currently underway in the Middle East, are well known. In this regard, Uruguay has always maintained the position of two states, two peoples. The Uruguayan government hence takes very seriously the reports produced by the international community concerning the Palestinian territories and urges the implementation of the recommendations made by the United Nations. At the same time, we urge the immediate suspension of military operations of death. We urge the suspension of death of innocent civilians. And we request the release of the hostages. In our world, at the same time, there are other persistent and worsening, more widespread and permanent tragedies, to such an extent that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted in this very assembly 77 years ago, stands as a revolutionary manifesto in the times that we are living through, beginning with its first article, which proclaims all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, and, endowed as they are with reason and conscience, should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. How far we are from our own principles and commitments when we see that the gap between those who have the most and those who suffer the most is ever greater. How far we are when we see that the principles of freedom and equality are increasingly estranged, and we hear much more talk of a supposedly free individual than of egalitarian societies in terms of income or the enjoyment of rights. How far we are from human sensibility when we forget that our main calling must be to stand with the majority, listening to every problem or anguish of our people and understanding even and fundamentally those who think differently. Madam President, I come from a country with a long, faithfully documented tradition in international politics. This tradition includes staunch support for multilateralism in all of its facets, political, economic, cultural, as the best and only way to face the challenges to which I have referred. It also, of course, includes a permanent commitment to international law, a commitment to dialogue and to the building of peace as one of our greatest contributions in the context of a fragmented and polarized world. My country's entire political system is proud to contribute decisively to global tasks such as the maintenance of international peace and security, the consolidation and development of international law through participation in normative bodies and in international courts, through our support for disarmament, food security, global health, and commitment to addressing climate change. In this context, I wish to highlight my country's historic commitment to the multilateral peacekeeping system. In the last 35 years, and without interruption, Uruguay has deployed battalions to various United Nations peace operations. We've taken on this role to such an extent that we've become the leading country in Latin America and the second per capita worldwide in contributing to this type of missions. Moreover, we have done this with particular distinction because our troops have been specialized in the most emblematic role of these peace operations, that is, the protection of civilians in armed conflicts. The nations represented in this assembly are well aware that my small country is very far from standing out for its military might or its economic dominance. And it is there, paradoxically, that our strength lies. Because we are incapable of standing in anyone's way. On the contrary, our strength lies in intangible capacities that this world greatly needs, because we are a country that can be relied upon to promote dialogue and peace. Firstly, because those principles define us as a republic and are evident in our respect for the separation of powers and the rule of law, the strength of our democratic system, and our respect and promotion of human rights and social equity, among other things. Secondly, because this is how we have historically conducted ourselves on the international stage. As early as in 1907, for instance, my country took a firm stance at the Hague Conference on Arbitration, seeing it as an essential and obligatory mechanism for resolving conflicts between states. Just a few years later, in 1921, Uruguay was the first state in the world to accept the jurisdiction of the Permanent Court of International Justice, the predecessor of the International Court of Justice. On the basis of these and other historical precedents, I hereby reaffirm that Uruguay is in an excellent position to be able to offer itself to the world as a host for negotiations, as a promoter of networks of dialogue and mediation, leading to the construction of peace and the prevention of conflicts. Believe me, we are prepared for this ever more urgent and necessary challenge. Among other reasons, because we have learned, as my country's former president, José Pepe Mujica, said, that tolerance is the foundation for peaceful coexistence. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Eastern Republic of Uruguay. The Assembly will hear an address by Her Excellency Natasha Pirc Musar, the President of the Republic of Slovenia. I request protocol to escort Her Excellency and invite her to address the Assembly.
Madam President, please accept my warmest congratulations on your election at this historic 80th anniversary of the United Nations. Your election underscores the vital importance of including women in the decision-making process. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, in 1945, the end of the Second World War was greeted with celebrations, and hopes were placed in a new era of peace and cooperation, embodied by the creation of the United Nations. However, those hopes were soon overshadowed by the onset of the Cold War. When it ended in 1991, we once again dared to believe that this would pave the way to the vision of lasting peace, security, and cooperation as enshrined in the UN Charter. Sadly, that vision has not materialized. In fact, the situation has worsened, and here is why. Firstly, the Security Council, envisioned as the very pillar of collective security, is failing to meet the expectations of the world, if it ever has. The Permanent Five were supposed to be role models for the rest of the world working for peace. Some work in their own interests instead. Secondly, the promise of the Sustainable Development Goals is faltering. Progress is lagging, and with cuts in development assistance, millions of the world's poorest are pushed further away from the access to even the most basic services. Thirdly, international law appears to stand at the precipice of irrelevance. The independence of elected international judges, the integrity of human rights institutions, personal security of human rights defenders, and the authority of this organization are under siege. Fourthly, the Genocide Convention risks becoming a relic of the past. Some states have put the International Criminal Court to its greatest challenge ever. Its prosecutors, whose only duty is the pursuit of justice, and its judges, whose responsibility is to uphold the law, our international law, now face sanctions and intimidation. As if the states that sanction them would prefer to shield the alleged perpetrators of atrocities rather than confront the truth and help deliver justice. Fifthly, the landmark opinion of the International Court of Justice affirming that international law obliges states to prevent harming the climate already feels obsolete. And finally, states are withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, from the Ottawa Treaty, and from the UN agencies, or simply cutting their finances. Each such act chips away at the support for multilateralism, a system designed not for the powerful few, but for the benefit of all of us. Madam President, how are we to explain these trends to our electorates, to our people, and above all, to our children? Shall we tell them that this is the new normal, that might makes right, that the strong may seize what they want because they can, that they can kill with impunity because they can, that they may pollute, wage wars, and trample on international law just because they can? Are we prepared to look our children in the eyes and say, "This is the world you will inherit and there is nothing we can do about it"? With the adoption of the Pact for the Future last year, we have charted a path toward a stronger, more forward-looking United Nations. But we must now create the conditions to fulfill our commitments. One way forward is to establish a permanent advocacy network to give the Pact unconditional, sustained political support. To this end, I propose the creation of a global forum for the future, an inclusive movement of states committed to multilateralism, mutual respect, and the defense of our shared vision. A movement determined to stand up for the pact and drive its implementation at every level. As states consider how to implement the pact for the future, some solutions may be seen as inconvenient today, but in the long run, ladies and gentlemen, they are not optional. They are systemically necessary. The first example is the reform of the Security Council. We all recognize that it is the principal organ entrusted with the maintenance of international peace and security. But what it is not, and must never be, is a body that stands above international law to defend the interests of some at the expense of others. Jus cogens norms must be safeguarded as a matter of principle. If the prohibitions against genocide and crimes against humanity are accepted as jus cogens norms, can any permanent member claim a legitimate veto right in such circumstances? Member states have attempted to address this question through many reform proposals, but with minimal progress. This is why we must dare to go further now. We, the General Assembly, must take a bold step and request an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice on this very question. Second, we must confront the gap between our words and actions on gender equity. Progress has been made, but far too modestly. Over the past 80 years, 13% of leaders in multilateral organizations have been women. And no woman has ever served as Secretary General of the United Nations. And this, ladies and gentlemen, must change. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let us make history. Today, the 80th session of the General Assembly is led by only the 5th woman to hold the presidency. By the end of this session, she would be joined by a Madam Secretary General-elect, a living proof to 4 billion women that even the most impossible job is not beyond their reach. But gender representation is not enough. What we must achieve is actual gender equity because it benefits not only women and girls, but entire societies. True equity requires systemic change, and so women's empowerment must remain at the heart of our global agenda. International organizations must weave a gender perspective into every strand of policy making. And that should be a result of effective participation of women and girls themselves. Electing a Madam Secretary General would be historic, but it must only be the beginning of a much deeper transformation. Madam President, the Pact for the Future sets out clearly what must be done to change our world for the better. I have mentioned only 2 of the many challenges we must confront decisively. But we can only succeed as a community if we accept that there is no future for humanity without a fundamental change. The mandate of the Global Forum for the Future would be to push towards such a change. This is why it must be inclusive. It must not be merely a coalition of countries. It must inspire hundreds of millions of people. For when it comes to human dignity, the constituency of like-minded individuals is vast, diverse, and knows no borders. Human dignity is indivisible. We must fight for it no matter how great the obstacles are. And there are many, we know that. Think of hunger. Time and again, humanity rose across continents to confront the scourge of hunger, to no avail. Worse still, hunger is now being weaponized, turned into a tool of war. We receive reports on a daily basis of how women and children are starved because they are marked as legitimate targets, as enemies. How cruel, how inhumane is that, ladies and gentlemen? We cannot allow this to happen any longer. 40 years ago, musicians stood against hunger. Instead of guns, they, the Band Aid, used music. The world heard them, but they were not loud enough, as hunger has not been eradicated. Today, we have science. We can address on a scale beyond imagination not only hunger, but every act of violence against human beings and all human fears. Granted, science, technology, and global connectivity are too often twisted by cynical leaders and warmongering regimes. But they can also be harnessed for the common good. Artists, influencers, and visionaries with audiences of millions can join forces with the governments of like-minded nations. Together, their voice in defense of humanity could become irresistible. Together, we can demand real action by all governments, all world and community leaders on the Pact for the Future, and hold to account those who betray human dignity to its very core, through wars of aggression, genocidal policies, and crimes against humanity. If we join forces and make ourselves heard, nobody can ignore us, not even the most arrogant governments and individual politicians. Of course, such initiatives cannot emerge out of thin air. They require leadership, strong, inclusive, and fearless leadership. We, the leaders of today, are only transient custodians of power. Some of us may not be here after the next election, but that is precisely why we must act now. Our responsibility and destiny will be judged by how we treat our planet and its people today. We simply cannot afford silence, ignorance, or passivity, not while we hold power and possess the power of the word. Hesitation is not an option, Madam President. For most of us, members of the UN, is not might that makes right. It is the opposite. We must not allow the powerful few to ignore us. We must not surrender to a world where power alone prevails. We, the majority of United Nations members, must be role models. We must work for a different world. The Global Forum for the Future can be a platform for the much-needed transformation in which partnerships with non-state actors and companies are indispensable. Profits must finally serve development for all. Innovation and sustainability must drive tolerance, mutual respect, and inclusive dialogue. Is that too much to ask? If we, the leaders of this planet, can offer nothing but terror, conflict, pollution, fear, inequalities, and war to 8 billion people, then we must confront the truth. We are complicit in crimes against our civilization and our planet. And not just us, heads of states, but leaders of international institutions, CEOs, and every individual with the power to make a difference share this responsibility. None of us can claim ignorance of what is at stake. If we believe in human dignity for all, we must deliver more. A world that fulfills lives, not threatens them. We must say yes to inclusive multilateralism and a resounding no to multipolarism. Let us show that this General Assembly can and will make a difference, as it has often done before. Let us demonstrate that we reject arrogance, hatred, and willful blindness to a lack of equality and justice, to wars of aggression, crimes against humanity, and genocide, because they tear us apart for generations. And let us proclaim in all seriousness and sincerity that we embrace personal and collective responsibility to uphold humanity, sustainable development, and international law, because this will keep us together as a civilization for generations. And Madam President, let me end on a personal note. For the sake of future generations, to fulfill our responsibility as human beings, to ensure that we are on the right side of the history, we should do the right thing. We did not stop the Holocaust. We did not stop the genocide in Rwanda. We did not stop the genocide in Srebrenica. We must stop the genocide in Gaza. There are no excuses anymore. None. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Slovenia. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Kasim Jomart Tokayev, the President of the Republic of Kazakhstan. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished delegates, for 8 decades, the United Nations has played a pivotal role in combating humanity's global challenges. Over that time, it has led our common efforts on collective security, nuclear non-proliferation, peacekeeping, development, poverty reduction, sustainability, and human rights. But we must also face the truth. The world around us has changed profoundly and, unfortunately, not for the better. That's why the United Nations remains today a symbol of hope for millions around the globe. This historic meeting is a unique opportunity to recommit ourselves to the founding principles and goals of our universal and truly indispensable organization. However, we cannot turn a blind eye to the real crisis thrust in multilateral institutions. Serious violations of international law have become new normality, which undermines global stability and erodes confidence between peoples, between political leaders, and between states. In this challenging time, we all must empower the United Nations to make it more adjustable to the realities of today's unpredictable world. The spirit of mutual understanding and eagerness to cooperate must prevail over dangerous warmongering. State leaders have a responsibility to move toward making peace. A failure of the current generation of leaders to act is not an option, because future generations will pay a much greater price. In this regard, comprehensive reform of the United Nations is a strategic necessity, not a subject for endless contemplations. We need to establish a new group of truly dedicated people who will highly professionally and without any hesitations make concrete proposals for reforming the United Nations to make it better suited to the challenges of today and objectives of tomorrow. A central pillar of this bold effort to renew the United Nations should be a reform of the Security Council. Major powers of Asia, Africa, and Latin America should be represented in the Security Council on the rotational basis. In addition, Kazakhstan strongly believes that the voices of responsible middle powers also need to be seriously amplified in the Security Council. In fact, they have already started to play a larger positive role in international relations, bringing balance and building trust. They can act as bridges within the United Nations when major powers are divided or failing to resolve pressing issues of common concern. Above all, a credible United Nations for the 21st century requires member states to take concrete steps toward durable peace and security. Otherwise, the United Nations is doomed to forever mitigate consequences while root causes forever proliferate. We can begin this process already today by reaffirming our steadfast commitment to the Charter of the United Nations. The founding principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and peaceful resolution of disputes must be upheld without exception. Selective application of the Charter undermines its credibility. The world needs a new consensus based on trust, inclusiveness, and shared responsibility. For example, the enemy state clauses of the Charter, historical remnants of the Second World War, have already been recognized by the overwhelming majority of the international community is obsolete. For all these reasons, it's time to have a serious conversation about Charter review. Today we face an alarming reality. Arms control treaties are collapsing, and with them, so are the foundations of strategic stability. Global military spending in 2024 hit a record $2.7 trillion. The global cost of violence reached nearly $20 trillion. Therefore, rebuilding a robust global security architecture should remain a top priority for the international community. We advocate relaunching high-level dialogue among nuclear powers and stronger multilateral action to drastically reduce the looming threat of nuclear weapons. More widely, we must begin the hard work of getting rid of the militant mindset. We can do so by tracking closely how much our countries invest in peace. Kazakhstan is ready to host a new dialogue on nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. We can focus on informal, inclusive exchanges that reinforce the NPT and support progress toward the CTBT. We also call to advance our proposal to establish international agency for biological safety and security. Kazakhstan remains concerned by the Ukrainian crisis, which continues to seriously harm civilians, damage global trust, and undermine international security. Nonetheless, bilateral and international diplomatic efforts on this conflict should continue along with political flexibility to meet the long-term interests of both states. Territorial disputes are never easy to resolve and require mutual restraint and responsibility for the sake of future generations. The psychology of animosity drags all involved in conflicts to the abyss, leaving no chance to reach peace. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza has reached a disastrous scale that cannot be ignored. This conflict stems from a complex historical background. We cannot ignore the root cause of this belligerence. Kazakhstan calls for full protection of all civilians and unhindered humanitarian access in strict compliance with international humanitarian law. We reaffirm our support of the two-state solution, with the United Nations playing a central role. Kazakhstan acknowledges diplomatic initiatives aimed at regional reconciliation in the Middle East, including the Arab Peace Initiative, the New York Declaration, and the Abraham Accords, and others. They demonstrate that leadership and political will can turn division into cooperation and shared benefit. We also welcome the normalization of relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia under the mediation of the United States President. It shows that even entrenched